Welcome to our family's boat shop, everyone. This week's episode, we are going to be dealing with some below the waterline fiberglass and Gelcoat damage. We're going to go under the boat and we're going to assess the damage. We're going to use a grinder to remove that damaged fiberglass and Gelcoat, discuss tips and tricks for applying fiberglass overhead, mixing custom putties as filling and fairing, and finally applying Gelcoat. So if you're ready, let's jump right into it. I wanted to show you how we've actually already started doing some grinding right in here, and look at the difference. You see a lot of opacity and kind of whiteness in the fiberglass, and we're actually through the laminate right there, and there's kind of a void. We want to remove all this damaged material. As you can see, we got separation and the color change. We come back here a little bit further and we kind of got uniform color across. Now there's a little air void right there, so we may do a little more sanding or grinding, but generally when you still see this line here, we want to remove material so we don't see that break anymore. So what we're using is just a Hercules adapter and a little Makita cordless. I don't believe this one turns at quite as high in RPM as your standard corded one, so that could make a difference, but it's doing a pretty nice job of collecting the dust for on the cheap, especially if you've already got a shop vac. But what I want to do is take this off here briefly. I want to finish up the last little bit, but I kind of want to show you the difference if you don't have it on there, how much more dust this thing is going to generate. All right, so I've finished all of the sanding and grinding underneath the boat. I'm going to show you the finished result there in just a second, but I want to talk a little bit about materials for surface prep first. Now, before you actually start grinding or material removal, good idea to be the surface you're working with is clean. I like to use acetone. A lot of times we'll put it in a little Zep sprayer and you can distribute it. Wipe it down with a cloth or maybe a Scotch-Brite pad to kind of clean any oils or residues off the surface. We did that prior to grinding on this boat. And then generally I like to use either a 36 or a 24. 24 is going to be quite aggressive. Either of these can work. A lot of times I like to go with the more aggressive in a lot of cases. And this little Makita cordless grinder works super good. We'll be sure to put a link for all the tools and the materials that we're using below our video's description. We got a very nice Amazon store. Now, before we go underneath the boat too, we're gonna kind of talk a little bit about options. Vinyl ester resin is my preferred resin for below the waterline. This is from Fiberglass Warehouse, and or a structural putty that's pre-thickened. And then we got a combination of fiberglass materials and peel ply that we may be using. Come under here with me, I wanna show you. But you can kind of see in relation to my hand what we've got here. We took out probably about 1/8 of an inch of total depth, maybe a little more in a couple places, but you can see that we've kind of gotten all that opacity off of there. And generally what you're going to want when you're doing this kind of grinding or sanding on the amount of material you take out, we call that the scarf ratio or the bevel ratio, is about 12 or 15 to 1. Some cases you can even go further if you want to. It certainly won't hurt anything to go further, but not much benefit. So if you had a 1/4 inch thick material, that would mean if you removed a 1/4 of an inch, you would sand out about 3 inches. So we took off about 1/8 of an inch. So I've gone about 1.5 inches or probably a full 2.5 inches out on either side. And we're gonna be beefing that up and building this back. This morning I came in and was gonna do some final detailing and really put some nice deep 24 grit scratches. And as I move back into surfacing this, we're seeing some stress cracks that radiate up through the Gelcoat and actually down into the laminate there. And I don't love those at all. So otherwise I'm pretty happy with the prep work we've done, but I am gonna do some more grinding and chase some of those cracks out and see how far they go. So we have done a bunch of sanding. I want to show you the finished results of grinding out those little stress cracks. We opened that up a bit, give you my hand there as a size comparison, but we were able to remove all those stress cracks in the Gelcoat. Luckily, It only went down just through the gel coat and about what I would call the skin coat, which is typically a couple layers of CSM. So the next step, we're gonna use a little bit of acetone. I like to put them in the little Zep spray bottles. If you've been following the channel, you know that's kind of my MO there. And we're just gonna clean this off a little bit. Start at the top and at the front. We just want to get any potential humidity or any kind of residue off of there. Then, important to get a little bit of airflow going, folks. So we're using some nice big fans. All right, it's time for some fiberglass, folks. Using the vinyl ester. We're gonna use about 4 ounces or so, or about 125 milliliters. And we're gonna mix it fairly spicy because I'm doing what I would call a primer coat. There we go. Always important to shake before using if the material's been sitting for a little while. And we got a little MEK dispenser and our handy dandy little cheat sheet there. So for 4 ounces, need like 1.25 to 2.5 cc's. And like I said, I want to go on the warm side today. So we're going to go there near that 2.5 mark. We want this to kick off fairly fast, but I'm going to leave it unthickened at this point because I want it to penetrate down into the open exposed fibers to get a optimal bond there. That's kind of what we've been doing the prep work, using like a 24 grit disc to really get some tooth on the surface, cleaning with acetone, and then right before we apply this primer coat of resin, we're going to heat it one more time with the heat gun to really open up those fibers and make sure there's not any residual moisture or contaminants on the surface. You can see that the vinyl ester does change colors. That's a signal that we got some good activation going on there. A lot of times I like to go over the surface 2 or 3 times, especially where we are down here in the deep south. Humidity is always high and we want a premium bond initially. It seems like when you warm up that surface, it kind of gets the molecules of the materials activated again and receptive. Burn off any moisture. This is the critical step, is that initial bond. We're gonna work it into any of those dry fibers underneath there. Not uncommon for a lot of factory boats to see some air bubbles and some voids, and we're gonna address that as well. So we're gonna be doing this primer coat, and I'm actually gonna be thickening the rest of this batch of resin, and we're gonna use it to make a bit of a putty. Now's a good time to thank everybody for tuning in. The channel has been growing rapidly over the last few months, and we're just a little ways away from springtime. Seems like a lot of people are getting ready to get back to work on their boat projects. I'd love to hear what you're working on. I also like to take this opportunity to thank you folks for subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, telling a friend. It helps us do more of this kind of stuff. So thank you very, very much. If you could see the surface under a microscope when you sand it and grind it and then heat it up and put the acetone on it, there would be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of little fibers that are exposed. And that is a part of what we're doing here, is a mechanical bond. The resin is kind of grabbing onto those little fibers and down in the grooves where the grinder marks are. But that's also where vinyl ester excels. Vinyl ester is more similar to epoxy in a lot of ways than it is to polyester. So it's much better at initial bonding and grabbing on to older surfaces, and it's much better at waterproofing. So that's one of the reasons we really, really prefer it in almost every instance. So we've got a little bit of material left. Let's go back over to our mixing table, and we're gonna add just a bit of some fumed silica. Source that from Fiberglass. Now you do want to be careful when working with fumed silica. It can get airborne. It's not good to get it in your system either. Sometimes we'll run a vacuum cleaner right here beside it, but if you stir it with a stick and just kind of take your time, usually we don't get too much airborne material there. That's one cool thing about mixing your own putty, is you can get unique consistencies. Now generally what we do is we would thicken our putty. If we're gonna be making some dedicated putty, we would thicken it first and then add the catalyst. But I'm trying to kind of utilize the rest of the material that we mixed and kind of expedite things. Going with a little bit of the 1/4 inch milled fibers as well. That's gonna give it some additional strength as well as thickening properties. This is very common here on the channel. If you've been following us, you know this is a pretty common mix. Now, if you're doing larger batches, you can use a drill with a mixer. If that works for you, it can certainly work well, especially when you're doing large volumes. Yeah, that's about right. I like it. And I'm just gonna kind of work a light layer of this material on. One thing I've found that if you have any air bubbles or voids when you're fiberglassing overhead, it's almost like it's a starting point for the, oh, see this way? Gotta be careful. Working upside down, it'll drip right down on you. Eye protection, very important there, folks. If that were to get in your eye, that would not be good. No bueno for sure. No bueno. Definitely a technique that the more you do it, the better you're going to get. Sometimes starting with something less critical. Below the waterline, under the boat repairs, probably some of the trickier and more critical ones. So I would probably recommend starting with something easier to start your fiberglass journey if you're new to doing this kind of work. Not that it can't be done, but not the easiest, even for someone that's been doing it the better part of their life. And we're gonna let this start to do a little bit of what we call tacking off. So we're just gonna give that a few minutes for some of the solvents to evaporate. Now, again, if you folks follow the channel, you know I like to use a ZEP sprayer, acetone bucket for cleaning our blades. Super easy just to hit it with some acetone and you are good to go. A lot of people think that these ZEP sprayers won't hold up to acetone, but they absolutely will. But acetone is highly flammable, folks, so just be aware of that. Be super careful. No cigarettes, no open flames, no sparks. It'll go boom on you. So yeah, another little small batch. We're gonna start actually doing a little bit of laminating, about another 2.5 cc's or so, fairly spicy. I want this stuff that we're doing overhead to kick off pretty fast. So temperature is going to be very important. Today it's about 70 degrees, maybe high 60s. So the hotter it is outside, the less catalyst you typically are going to need. And generally, I like to run my vinyl ester mixes a little bit on the higher end. So usually 1 to 2%, but with most of our vinyl esters, we try to stay in that 1.5 to 2, or maybe 2 to 2.5% if it's quite cold. Again, we're getting that color change. That's kind of what we want. Got a little roller here. Got a piece of 1708 that I've already cut to fit on that initial strip. Another little trick I want to show you folks. I don't know if y'all have seen me do this yet on the channel, but you can just use a trash bag. A heavy duty trash bag can work really good because we're working upside down. Sometimes you can pre-soak or pre-wet these pieces. Helps in getting that initial bond going there. Quite hard to wet it out and dab this stuff sometimes overhead. We may be shifting to a roller. A roller in a minute can be one of those little tricks that can really help. Now this really only works with the 1708. If you try to go with the CSM, the solvents in the vinyl ester or polyester are going to make the CSM fall apart, and you don't use CSM with epoxy. So just remember that. Little fin roller there, or what we call a bubble buster. boat builder's friend for sure. Gloved hands. Let's see if we can capture this. All right. We're gonna see if we can't get this to make an initial bond into the thickened vinyl ester. We've got our wet out 1708. We rolled it up so that we can, maybe my cameraman, I know it's a very tricky angle to get a shot under here, but we're trying to replicate what we took out. We only went into one layer of the heavy fabric on this boat. It looked like it was actually an 1808, but you can use 1708 or 1808. They kind of interchange. That thickened putty, in my opinion, helps kind of this material conform or grab. It also fills any little irregularities. All right. I'm liking that pretty good. That is pretty much where the heaviest material was missing, and we're going to start getting ready to add some CSM over that as well and kind of blend it. The CSM tends to blend better. That's pretty good stuff. Here we go. This time we're going to go a little bit bigger batch, about 8 ounces or so. Another good general rule of thumb is, like, if you have 8 ounces, you could half that. So about 4 cc's is going to be about right. Or again, we got our little cheat sheet there, 2.5 to 5 cc's on the low end for 8 ounces. But as a good rule of thumb, like I said, about half of whatever ounces, or for our folks there on the metric system, that would be about 250 milliliters. If that's, hopefully that's helpful. Which makes me think I need to appreciate, or we appreciate and thank our viewers in Australia and the UK. We've been having a lot of folks from overseas. I know our wintertime is your summertime there on the in the southern hemisphere, so we appreciate you folks tuning in so much. Would love to visit Australia one of those days. That's on my bucket list places I would love to visit. Do some fishing and some sightseeing. I just saw a video about Steve Irwin. He was one of my heroes as a young man. Love that guy, and miss him. Every time I see a video of him, I gotta watch it. Tell me, comment below if you loved Steve Irwin and thought he was awesome and still is awesome. Always enjoyed watching him as a young person, and still do. All right, the crocodile hunter. Now, one thing I did, I actually had to shift my table a little bit. You notice we got some sunlight kind of creeping up on us. If you're new to working with fiberglass, you got to remember that UV or sunlight really accelerates it. So generally work in the shade if you can, because your resin, especially in a pan or in a large mass, is going to kick off a lot faster. Which also makes me think about, if you put it in a pan and it can be spread out versus in a cup, you're going to get a longer pot life as well. This is another little trick for working in hot weather. Sometimes you don't need a full Tyvek suit and it can be quite hot. And a lot of times I rub the knees, or you split them in the middle when you put them on, and I'll take my older Tyvek suits and cut the legs off of them. And for something like this where you really just need your upper half protected, I just got it started, and then use that roller as you move forward. See, we're inching it ahead and just wetting it out as we go. That initial bond, again, very important. I wanted to use a little bit of 1708. It does have a small layer of CSM underneath it, and by priming the surface real well and by putting the thickened putty, that will help fill any irregularities and really promote adhesion. Eye protection, again, very important. Try to position your body so that you are not directly under the roller. Now you could use just a thickened, like a structural filler or putty in a lot of cases. I wanted to show this though. I've shown a lot of putty usage on the channel, and I thought it would be nice to actually show fiberglassing overhead or inverted. A lot of people wonder how you even do it, but you just have to plan your work and work your plan. I used to have a buddy that would say that. It's one thing about the CSM is it is very good at kind of conforming to irregular shapes. It bends and conforms and grabs onto surfaces better initially than 1708 or 1808. One cool thing about CSM, sometimes it'll break off, but you can just tear it and then restart. Now we just tore these little strips. That's the one thing about CSM is you can tear it. Pretty much everything else in the fiberglass world, you have to cut it. Scissors or electric shears. I've got videos of all of that stuff on the channel here, folks. We've got over 200 videos, almost every aspect of boat building, boat repair, gelcoat, epoxy, you name it. Now's a good time to do a little bit of bubble busting and really get a premium bond. That initial couple coats, everything else builds on that. That's your foundation. Don't want to skimp there. Don't fret if there are a couple little tiny bubbles in there. Sometimes you get occasional bubble that is nearly impossible. You can occasionally come back and drill it out and inject a little bit of resin in there. That is a solution. And a lot of times from the factory there can be numerous bubbles under there. Not that that's a good thing, but just remember that bubbles happen sometimes. All right, folks, here goes the last layer right down the keel. This was all the pieces that I had torn. Got about 6 or 7 layers total down the middle right now. Got some fans moving, some air. Generally we would go 3 or 4 layers if we were going like with a heavier fabric, but we can manage this today. I'm trying to move this along so that we can be maybe grinding this by this afternoon. There's always the optimal layers and the optimal cure times, but sometimes you can push that a little bit with a little bit of experience. I kind of have that. I would probably recommend, if you were doing this at home, do it in 2 phases with, like, say 3 layers and 3 layers. Just like that. Again, if it tears or breaks off, just pick back up, run it right onto the front. This is, in my opinion, the most difficult kind of fiberglassing is upside down. The longer roller can kind of help you contour a little more. Sometimes the shorter ones are better for tight spaces, but got to kind of use a delicate touch, or else you'll dent the fiberglass. Kind of push it in when it's in its curing phase. It's almost like in a gel form. You can kind of contour edges and get some of the ripples out and shape. You can get a bit of that with the peel ply as well. Don't think my piece of peel ply is going to make it all the way across. That's okay if we can get the majority of it, especially right here down the keel portion. I can possibly go get another piece Yeah, that's not bad. Get out there to the edges. It's a lot like applying wallpaper maybe, or window tint. You want the wrinkles out of it if possible. It's okay sometimes to apply and pull a little bit, get the wrinkles out. Although it's not the end of the world if there's occasionally a little wrinkle here or there. It's okay, that's manageable. Always important with peel ply to leave somewhere to start peeling it though. If you stick all the edges down, it can be very tricky. So like say for example, you might leave a little end or a tab right there. That way when it's hardened, you've got something you can grab and peel. Peel ply is relatively inexpensive. It's a one-time use product. Once you've used it on one surface, that's it. You don't use it again. But it can save a lot of sanding. So it's a consumable. It's something you use up, but it can save a lot of sanding. So that can be a good thing. Use that roller to kind of contour. One good thing is it'll kind of help keep it from sticking to your roller. Sometimes you'll come back with some resin over the peel ply. If you have a little bit left in a roller, just remember to leave an edge where you can grab it. The most crucial part of this repair is right in the middle. Peel ply also will reduce the amine blush if you were using epoxy. And if it was an epoxy that produced an amine blush, then if you did peel ply, that would alleviate that, eliminate it. Also leaves a nice surface texture. When you peel it off, theoretically it's ready to receive more layers of glass. It's another one of the benefits without further sanding. So about 2 hours have passed or so since we laminated our keel and applied some of the peel ply. Everything feels like it's tacked off and cured nice. I did find an additional strip of peel ply, but I thought it might be kind of cool to cover a little bit more of it and then show y'all the release if you've never worked with it before. Pretty cool stuff. Leaves a really nice surface and it's completely tack free. Oh, let's see if we can get up the full effect here. All right, that is a quality looking repair job there, folks, and pretty stark difference between the non-peel plied surface, but we've got a good looking repair going on. So we have finished most of our grinding, and as you can see, our sandpaper is not all gummed up. That's one of the benefits of using peel ply. But a lot of times people online are under the impression that you have to put something over the resin. Say for example, this was laminated resin, and you can see that we were able to sand that with no problem with our grinder. Now with finer sandpaper, it might gum it up a little bit, but it's not like it doesn't cure. It's just gonna stay slightly tacky on the surface. Now we're down to the final contouring, and a lot of times I like to use something like this little 3M block and some 60 grit. And we're just gonna get underneath here now that we've kind of feathered and shaped fairly close, using something like a little block and Starting from the front. And this will kind of knock down some of the lumps and bumps. You can see we're making a little bit of dust. It's amazing how good a block will work for that final contour. And it's not nearly as aggressive as a power tool, and sometimes that's what you need, something less aggressive. We're trying to blend this up in the front because we're going to be adding gel coat tomorrow, I believe. You can see that's really shaping up nice. And this is going to be almost like a completely pure repair without putties or fillers. So you got 100% glass and then gel coat, which is how the boat would have been from the factory. So yeah, that's starting to shape real nice. Just having a little bit of patience, taking your time, locking it in. If we kind of pan across this with the camera, I think that is looking pretty sharp. So phase one of the structural fiberglass repair of our project boat behind us is done. But during the editing process, I realized this video is running very long. So we're gonna make this a two-part video. In the next session, we're gonna be mixing up some thickened gel coat putty, fairing and smoothing things out a bit, and then applying our finished coats of gel coat. But I wanna thank everybody so much for tuning in to episode 1 of this. If you're enjoying the video so far, please remember to give us that thumbs up, like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend in your boating community. And remember, we have over 200 videos now on our channel dedicated to the DIYers out there learning how to do gel coat, fiberglass, and epoxy work on their own. So it's Captain Joe here, Island Marine Charters, Fish Bump TV on YouTube, and my son Logan, working hard behind the scenes, is my amazing cameraman. We'll catch you in the next episode.